Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Online Warriors podcast. I want to start by saying we appreciate our listeners so much because over here at the Online Warriors Central, it has been absolutely crazy. And what do I mean by that? Well, last week there was it was a drought of news, but you guys stuck with us. We gave you a show. Even though it was a limited, shorter episode, we gave you what we had, and we're going to keep trugging through. This week, however, we are just so busy with Halloween coming. Nerd Bomber's kind of feeling under the weather, and there's just too much going on. So in light of that, we are going to supplement this week's episode with one of our previous interviews. And in the kind of spirit of Halloween, and with bank robbers being a bit of a trendy topic right now, we are going to cover the interview from Schrödinger's cat burglar. So without further ado, enjoy that interview. We are here with Martin Binfield, the creator of Schrödinger's cat burglar, a new indie game that has been developed by him and his studio, Abandoned Sheep Games. How's it going, Martin? Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's going well. Yeah, thank you for getting me on the show to talk about the game. It's exciting to have the demo up and have people playing the game and see what people think of it.
Yeah, it's a pretty big milestone. Once again, thanks for, coming on the show and talking about it. But before we get into the game, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? I understand you're an animator turned game designer. So can you kind of walk us through your personal journey and how you kind of ended up here?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a long journey. Yeah, I got into the games industry back in the literal year 2000, working at Sony Cambridge in the UK. Worked on a few games there. The first game I worked on was one called Ghost Hunter, which recently came out on the PlayStation 5, backwards compatible, catalog thing. So jump into that and you'll probably see some monsters, which back in those days we were using textures of people's beards and stuff, like teddy bear fur. So you'll see my beard in that game. And yeah, worked on Heavenly Sword while I was there in partnership with Ninja Theory. I was doing animation, Little Big Planet on the PSP. And so all that time I was doing art and animation jobs essentially. Worked for a smaller indie studio called Mode 7 on a title called Frozen Cortex and did animation work on that. That was a kind of robots playing American football kind of game. Then worked at Jagex on not RuneScape. While I was working for them, I was on a concept, and I was there until about the year 2018 when I moved from the UK to Australia to be with my wife over here. And at that point, I left the studio job at Jagex and then moved to a country where I didn't know what I was doing essentially and didn't know what the plan was. And at that point, I started to look into game design and stuff and using Unity. So before that point, I was very much just, animator in games, enthusiast about game design, very much an amateur at programming. Mm-hmm. And I had the opportunity to just kind of get stuck into playing around with some stuff. And I had an idea for a game that I wanted to explore. So I kind of looked into that. And then, that kind of grew into Schrödinger's cat burglar and just, really helped to, I find this thing as well. I think this is true. I've definitely observed it in myself and other people, but I feel like if you're an animator, it's kind of, you eventually end up in programming. I think there's a weird parallel between things moving in animation and systems running in programming. So it's a like-minded brain thing. But I think the pipeline from animator to programmer kind of is a thing, essentially.
It feels like it's one of those, a square can be a rectangle, but a rectangle can't be a square kind of situation. Because let me tell you, animation is hard. It's very, very hard.
Yeah. I often get this as well when I ask people to look at my animations and they'll go, "Oh, I can't comment on this. I'm not an animator." And the really hard thing about animation is that it's not easy to do, but it's really easy to tell if it's done wrong. And so there's a really kind of a struggle. Everyone can tell a bad animation, but to do a good animation, correct animation is hard. So I do enjoy animation, but I've done as little as possible on this project so far. But I've managed to spend some time doing some cute cat jogs and trots and hacks and things like that. So that's good. But I much prefer doing programming at the minute.
So the game we're talking about, Schrödinger's cat burglar, is a co-op game where you're both a cat, but also two cats, and you're in really two places at once. When developing this game, this is kind of a lot to it type story. Did you start with the story and the character animations first, or did you jump right into the programming and sort of just let it build itself? And as you're exploring, like you said, Unity, did the concept just kind of come alive?
Thankfully, I have a good anecdote for how this game came to be. So initially, I was working on a completely different game, which featured animals, and I hadn't done modeling for a long time. So I kind of made like a few really low poly like models of things, and I made a cat and I made a dog and things like this. And I kind of iced that project and then looked into a different project, which at the time was called The Entangle Men. And the idea was that you were two burglars who'd been quantum entangled. And that was like the mechanic there. And I had the idea for it. And I was like, I should probably try prototyping this up. I should maybe just try and use a model I've got. And I remember I had the cat model. And then suddenly, like a bolt of lightning, it was like, obviously you've got entanglement and you've got a cat. Schrodinger's cat burglar just sort of like fell into place just from that. So yeah, so it was like the mechanic was not actually.
I'm so glad we asked this question.
Yeah, because it's like I remember people saying about like there's sometimes when you're writing books, the characters kind of maneuver themselves and put themselves in positions and stuff, and it really felt like the idea for the mechanic and the fact that I was going to like use a cat for it were just like sitting there waiting to be put together. But yeah, so it came from that essentially.
So, you mentioned you had the cat model already ready to go. Do you have any personal attachment to cats or animals in general? Like, do you have a little Mittens at home maybe?
Very strong attachment to cats. Grew up with cats all my life. Big fan of them. They are like the most funny animal I think that you can own because they're idiots and they're very good. And when I started working on the project, we didn't have a cat, but now we have two. Got Hugo, who's a big, dumb, tabby boy, and Murphy, who's a small black and white cat. Well, she's mostly black. She's just got a splash of white on her chest. But yeah, so when I was doing all the kind of animation stuff for Mittens, it was just from my innate affinity for cats. But like since then, I've been able to base some like animations from the game. So if you've played the game, the bit when Mittens comes around after the machine and her paws are twitching, that's because my cat Hugo sleeps on my desk and I see him dreaming and his paws twitch. So it's very much based on real life from that.
That's incredible.
So the game obviously suggests heavy use of quantum physics. Beyond the classic Schrödinger's cat example, did you find yourself really studying into this topic to deepen your own understanding and then use that learning to create new challenges and abilities?
Yeah, it's been an interesting one because it turns out that I know quite a few quantum engineers in my life through like friends of friends. And whenever I talk to them about the game and describe the mechanics, I can see them getting angrier and angrier because that's not how it works. And I've looked into things like the double slit experiment and things like this, and like, trying to find out ways to take inspiration from the field of quantum mechanics and quantum theory and put it into the game as like mechanics. But it all comes down to like the central idea of you being in two places at once. And there's a mechanic that actually it's very core to the experience, but we didn't cover it in the demo. I think I want to tweak the demo and make sure there's a little teaser at the end. But it's the concept of observation. And the idea that, you're in two places, but that's only possible as long as no one's observing. So like later in the game, like security cameras essentially come in and then there's observers. And it means that if you are split and you're observed in one place, you can't exist in the other. And we have a kind of a fun mechanic there to do with what happens to the other cat. But yeah, because that's like the core experience. Everything has to kind of fit around that. And yeah, I haven't found a way to get in, for example, double slit experimentation and things like that in there and wave particle duality. But we do have some things in there. Like you can do this in the demo with the Heisenberg fields. So we've got Heisenberg as a term. And for the benefit of the listeners, Heisenberg fields are these fields that you can only pass through when you're fused, so that when you're split, can't get past them to keep two cats together essentially. But you can't enter a field when you're split. And when you're inside the field, you can't split. But you can be standing on a field generator that is deactivated while split, and that field can activate. And when that happens, you become quantum locked, which is essentially frozen in place. And yeah, so that term quantum lock, I think, is a real thing. It's to do with like super cold magnetic suspension of materials. So we just use it as a mechanic in the game to freeze the cat. So yeah, we're very much like, if it sounds cool, we'll think of mechanic that sounds like it could be that, but it's not extremely accurate like quantum physics stuff. No.
When the security camera catches the cat, does it turn into a wave type particle?
It waves at the camera.
It waves. Oh, that would be so good.
Yeah, I haven't gone too deep on that one. Wave particle duality is too weird to make a game out of. I think that's the problem.
So, you mentioned that you want to go back and kind of edit the demo to give players a taste of a feature that you haven't featured yet. What other things are you most excited about for players to experience in the full version of the game when that eventually comes out?
I think like, I think mechanically speaking, I'm a massive fan of games like Fez, Tunic, Animal Well, all those kind of like Metroid Brainery types, which have got like hidden mechanics you didn't know you could do. Outer Worlds, of course, I should flag that up because that's one of my favorite games. But, and we're not like fully in that space. We're much more of a Portal kind of puzzle game, but I hope that people will find a few mechanics in the game that they didn't realize they could do from the very start. And then they are introduced to later in the game and realize it was under their nose the entire time. I'm also excited just for people to sort of hopefully be surprised by the story. I think it has some interesting stuff in there. So yeah, I think as long as we make it like, land well and yeah, make it interesting to follow, I hope people will be like, there'll be a few twists and surprises for people there.
I'm a very story-driven gamer. Like, I appreciate and love puzzles as well, but every time there's a good story in a game, I latch on. So I'm very excited to see what the full story is going to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me too. Because it's like, I know the shape of it. We're still, wrestling with the finer details, but I'm fairly certain that like, if we can land the ending, then it'll be really, really good. And I think we will. I think the ending's pretty strong, but I can't say anything about it. I don't want to I want to talk about the game as much as I can. And I also don't want to spoil things. So it's a real fine line to talk about.
My next question might contain spoilers, so feel free to tell me to shush. Are there any other animals in the game, like rats, for example, since they're common test subjects? And within your Steam page, there was a character, Lazy Susan. Does Susan have abilities?
You can see, like, Susan is in the demo. She is your, what's the term from Spider-Man? Like, guy in the chair.
I got Oracle vibes from, like, Batman,
yes,
for example, but yeah.
Exactly that. I mean, like, I think a big inspiration for the characters, and this is probably a bit too British centric, but Danger Mouse and Penfold, I don't know if like they're cartoon characters from Britain from the 80s and stuff. But anyway, that's like, it's that whole Snake and Otacon, Sly Raccoon and whatever the name of the turtle was. It's like that kind of like role kind of thing between them. But yeah, Lazy Susan being a hedgehog, I think she's a bit of a secret weapon for the game because she's a very endearing character. And yeah, so she's very cool. Other animals in the game, we definitely make reference to other animals, but we are a little bit budget restricted in terms of what we can actually represent in the game. So there definitely are other animals present in the world, but we may not feature them like visually in the game. But yeah.
Maybe that's sequel content.
Oh man, so much for the sequel. We've got many things we'd love to explore with infinite budget. But yeah, we're currently making this game taut and lean and muscular, to use like business terminology, to try and make it like as good as it can be with the budget that we have available to make it like really punchy, I guess is the word to put it.
So you started this project as a solo developer, and obviously, your funding and your team has also grown over time. What are some of the pros and cons to, when you were working alone versus now having to share your idea and the creation of, basically your brainchild with a small team behind your work now?
It's been a real up and down on the game. Like, to get into the weeds a little bit, if you go like searching around online, you'll probably find like interviews and stuff with me and maybe footage of the game from a few years ago. And you'll see that it was quite different. At that point, there was a third person chase camera to the game. And then since then, we've kind of refined it into a Little Nightmare style doll's house side camera, fourth wall removed kind of view. Yeah, so like I started off like solo and I was working on the game and it was essentially a top down game, like different again. And then I had some interest from people who were like, we think this looks great. We want to put some money into the project. And I said, yes. The budget increased. During that period, it's this idea of like, oh, maybe we should look into making the game a bit more like grander in scope, which is where third person camera mode came in. So around about that period, there was like a number of different people working on the game and the scope increased. I'll cut back to the question in a second, but ultimately, like, we decided after exploring that even though it was really, really cool to have a camera behind the cat, like in Stray, it kind of broke the central mechanic. So we pulled back from it a little bit. But at that point, we had a team of 6 or 7, I think it was. There was quite a few people working on it. We had like, audio team, composer, narrative designer, support programmer, puzzle designer, me, and an artist. And then we've subsequently come down for now to a smaller group, which is just me and the artist working on it. But at that time, yeah, we had a bunch of people. And I found it really exciting. I think I would be very happy to be in that state again soon, which we will be getting to, I think, as we get closer to like finishing the game off. But like, there's that definite balance of if you still have questions to answer, you don't want to have too many people because you have to have things for people to do, and you don't want to give them stuff that ultimately might change. And I think that's a little bit of what happened in that period. Like, I think we had so much great stuff from all these collaborators. I mean, for example, all the kind of the gags that work really well in the demo, they're from Elliot, our narrative designer. All the things about like Lazy Susan having too many tabs open and things like this. And like, that was really, really good to like sort it out. But because the game kind of changed form a little bit, like we've reduced ourselves down. So it's just me and Ziggy, who's the artist and level designer on the project. And working like that right now is like a real sweet spot. Like when it was just me on my own and I was just doing what I wanted to, it was fine. But also I didn't have a kind of another brain to bounce ideas off. Having a second brain definitely helps, like getting input from that. But then if you have like 7 brains, it gets a bit more, there's too much bouncing. Yeah. Like you have to keep the brain spinning. I think that's a mixed metaphor about plates, but yeah, there's a lot of like stuff to worry about there. So yeah, so I think, yeah, we're getting close to that point where it's again going to be a case of like just ramp up, get more people on board and just make stuff. But before getting there, like in the really interesting part of game design where you're coming up with stuff, it's really nice to just be able to like have a few people who can make a big impact and are not spinning the wheels, as it were.
For sure. So you described some moments during the development process when you had to step back and rethink a design choice or direction. How did you approach making those tough decisions?
I don't know how to answer this. Like, not with gusto. Not with courage, just through necessity, I guess. Like everything I've done like on this game essentially is because I think it's good and I want it to exist. And so it's very hard. Like this isn't we haven't like targeted a market with this. Like we've kind of just had the idea for the game and wanted to make it, and people foolishly believed in me. So it's very much on me to make it like good. And yeah, it's that thing of where I just kind of keep looking at the game and working out what kind of game would I want to play? And is it working for what the game I would want to play? And if it isn't, what would make it be that game I want to play? And so things like, we designed a whole bunch of like levels in third person. And then when we moved away from that, because it was like it was an unworkable thing with the mechanic of being in control of 2 characters at once. We tried various things like having a camera that swapped between them. We tried when you were split, the camera was top down, and when you fused, it was a third person, and just nothing felt right. And then when we went to the side view and it made everything work, it was like, this is clearly the right decision to go with. This makes sense of the game. So all the level designs we've done, which were in like third person view, we did throw them out, but we didn't bin them, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Like we kind of took what we were doing there. And especially with the puzzles, like you'll have seen the demo that when you go into some puzzles, the camera lifts up and looks straight down. Because we're not like a side view game. We're not like a 2D game. Sorry. We're like a 3D game. Mm-hmm. We're just viewed from one angle. So a lot of those puzzles still work, like they're the same design is just like carried straight over.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was that thing of like, yeah, judiciously looking through it and making the right call at the time to keep going forward in the right direction, I think.
Yeah, you said
that
something.
Answers the question.
Yeah, it does. You said something that really resonated with me. I'm going to shout out a book that I read recently. It's called Blood, Sweat, and Pixels. They kind of interviewed different game developers and things like that. And one of the hardest questions that was addressed in that book is, the game looks awesome, the plot is great, but is it fun? And having to make these tough decisions to determine, is this a fun game? Is this something that people play? Is one of the hardest things that I think you can answer without having some kind of bias. So I really like the answer and the way you approach that question.
Is it fun? For a game is also that thing where if we were doing a game with shooting, then you can kind of just make replicatable fun over and over. And when you have a non-violent game like ours, you don't have that option. So it's like you have to really think about what is going to be fun for the audience there.
One of the things I was just going to say that I've always found super fun, and I'm always clamoring for more of this, is couch co-op. And so I'm super jazzed that, that's something that you're including in Schrödinger's Cat Burglar. How did you approach designing the gameplay with multiplayer in mind? And what sort of challenges has that presented as you're, working through the development process?
Yeah, one of the big challenges there was when we went to third person, we had to drop it. And I was like, that's a shame. Mm-hmm. Like when I initially started it and when it was top down, like the idea of controlling both cats at once with the sticks felt good. And then it was a natural extension from there to make it into a 2-player game. And the key thing for it is that it isn't, there isn't a single player campaign and a co-op campaign. It's the same thing. And it's that idea that one player can solve every puzzle and two players can solve every puzzle. It's just like you've got an extra brain. And, you're like, we're trying to make it, the goal with the puzzle design is that for every puzzle that is, a progress blocker is you can complete it only moving one cat at a time. So we never require players to do dexterous control movement things of like move this cat and that cat together. And then we want to make sure that there are some bonus puzzles that will, supply the side of players who want to really test their own dexterity, or co-op players who want to have a bit more challenge than that. But yeah, we're not going to change dynamically in the game how the puzzles work if there's one player or two. We do have a system in there which I think is kind of cool. I don't think anything else does it really, but it's like a request system. So you can use the right stick to, I guess it's kind of like a ping system from Portal 2, but one player can kind of indicate to the other player what they want them to do with sticks and buttons and things like that. So like, I want you to go over here and I want you to interact with this and things. So that kind of helps things. But yeah, we are couch co-op. So, you can just yell at each other. So it's all there.
So how did you approach designing the various puzzles in the game, and what was the process of making them challenging but fair?
Continuously is probably the answer to that, like iteratively and over. We're playtesting a lot at the minute because we're doing the design of like the later game levels and like grey boxing them. And I'll run them past people. I've got some local game developer friends who'll jump in and play the levels. It's very hard to play test a puzzle game that escalates as well, because if you want people to play test level 7, they'll have to have played levels 1 to 6 to know what they're doing. So yeah, it's kind of, you've got a diminished resource there. But it's just constantly surprising. Things that I think are not hard in a puzzle is like, it's a consistent, like massive spike in difficulty at certain points. And me and Ziggy, when we're designing these puzzles, we don't see that. And then when people play test it and everyone gets hit on the same point, we go, oh, I see. Yeah, that is a massively difficult concept to just throw in there at the same time. So yeah, it's very much just, play test it and see how people get on with it. Like that's like, Valve did this with Portal, and that's how the game turned out so well, is they just kept play testing it over and over. And we don't have the resources to do it that extensively, but yeah, we're doing our best to get it like into shape so that.
I hope you're prepared for people are going to solve puzzles in ways you never dreamed of.
Yeah, I guess that's an interesting part with the game as well, is that we kind of, I'm hoping that we can have the game bounce from like explicitly, this is a puzzle room and there'll be one solution that we intend, to you're now in a world and you can use the powers you've picked up, and it's not immersive sim, but it's very much like, oh, just do what, it's not going to be a prescribed solution. You can just do things to get through stuff. And yeah, but I'm very keen to see people solve puzzles in multiple ways, and ways I was not expecting, definitely.
So for others who might be interested in, getting started making their own game, going down the road of solo development, do you have any words of wisdom that you've, kind of learned along the way?
Yeah, so I've been working on this game since 2018, and it's been a long time, right? I've not at any point not enjoyed. I've enjoyed the process the entire way through, but it is a long slog. But I think a lot of people often say, when you're getting into making your own games, you should do something small and finish it. And I had a problem like myself on that front, because I just didn't think of anything small enough that I would be interested in completing. So I think, I would say for people who do want to get into this sort of thing, is like, don't be afraid to start like a project that feels a little bigger than you think you might need to get into, but be prepared to be prepared to give up on it, or, stick with it for the long term. But yeah, I think like going through and like grow things bit by bit as well. Like that's the thing with like, this is iteration 3 of the project, I think. And it's like dated. I threw the code base out and started again 3 times to get to this point. And the last time I did it was 2020. So this is like 5 years worth of like, this same code base just building up and up and up. And as long as you kind of like approach things in a smart way to make it so that if you change something that you worked on before, you can, and everything else will still work around it, then, your game can just get bigger or smaller or whatever. But yeah, I think that's the only thing I'd say really, is like, work on something you want to work on. That'll make you work on it,
All right. Well, if anyone is interested in checking out this game, can be found on Steam. It is Schrödinger's Cat Burglar, and we are very excited for when it comes out. Do you have a date when you expect that it might be able to be playable for release?
It's difficult to say at this stage. So I probably should just say no comment. That's probably the appropriate, like, business game developer kind of way to approach this. Yeah, like, hopefully not too long, but yeah, I cannot put a pin.
We will hold you to hopefully not too long, legally.
Oh no, I've made a rod for my back now.
All right. Well, thank you again for sitting down with us. We loved having this chat, and we are excited for when this game hopefully does come out.
Yeah, any last words you want the listeners to know?
No, not particularly. I think, just thank you for being interested. And if you've played the demo in the past, or if it's still up, I'm not sure when this will air, but yeah, keep an eye on the Steam page. Engage, come at us with comments and things like that. But thank you very much for being part of the journey. And thank you both for having me on for this interview.
Thank you very much.